The smell of rosemary chicken filled the kitchen as I stirred the pot with slow, practiced hands. Cooking had always been my language of love. When words failed, a warm meal never did. Tonight felt special. My son and his wife had invited her parents over for dinner, and I wanted everything to be perfect. Maybe, I thought, if I put in a little extra care, my daughter-in-law, Amanda, would finally see me as more than just the help around the house. I wiped my hands on the apron and glanced at the family photo sitting on the counter. My late husband, Henry, smiling with that same quiet pride he wore every Sunday morning when we'd sit together on the porch. "You always try to win people's hearts through kindness," he used to say. "Sometimes it takes time." His voice echoed softly in my memory, a comforting hum amid the clatter of dishes. The doorbell rang, followed by bursts of laughter and hurried footsteps. Amanda's voice floated through the hallway, high-pitched and sweet. "Mom, Dad, so glad you can make it." I peeked out from the kitchen doorway. Her parents stood there in fine coats, their hands clasped politely, their smiles warm. My son, Michael, hovered beside them, trying to keep the evening light. Then came that familiar shift in Amanda's tone, the one she used when I was nearby. "Oh, don't worry about Mom. She's just in the kitchen getting dinner ready." Just in the kitchen. The words stung sharper than I expected. It wasn't what she said. It was how. Dismissive, as if I were a shadow fading into the wallpaper. Her mother's eyebrows lifted slightly, and her father offered a polite nod toward me when our eyes met, but Amanda quickly turned the conversation back to herself. I retreated into the kitchen before anyone noticed the crack in my smile. Dinner began with the usual pleasantries. Amanda's parents complimented the table setting, the wine, and, of course, the food. Every time someone praised the meal, Amanda responded, "Oh, Mom helped a little, but I handled the menu." I said nothing. Years of motherhood had taught me when silence spoke louder than words. When dessert came, Amanda waved her manicured hand toward the kitchen. "Mom, can you grab the pie? It's cooling on the rack." I nodded and turned back to fetch it. As I lifted the warm dish, I heard her mother whisper, "She seems lovely, so helpful." Amanda's reply was colder than the air outside. "She means well, but she's old-fashioned. I told her to just stay in the kitchen. That's where she's happiest." The pie trembled in my hands. I steadied it, careful not to let it fall. My heart did instead. The laughter that followed wasn't cruel, just careless, which somehow hurt worse. I walked back into the dining room, setting the pie down with quiet dignity. "Here you go," I said softly. Amanda avoided my eyes, pretending to fix a napkin. Her parents looked uneasy. Her father cleared his throat. "Margaret," he said kindly, "this is the best roast I've had in years." "Thank you," I replied, offering a small smile. "It's my pleasure." Inside, I felt my pride unraveling. I had raised a son who once kissed my forehead before school, who told me I was his hero. Now I stood in his house, a guest in my own family, invisible. When the meal ended, Amanda ushered everyone to the living room. I stayed behind to clean up, not because I had to, but because it gave me a reason to breathe. From the next room, I could hear them laughing again, glasses clinking. I looked out the kitchen window at the fading sunset, the orange glow washing over the garden Henry and I had once tended. "Stay in the kitchen," she'd said. Maybe she thought she was putting me in my place. What she didn't know was this kitchen had built generations. These hands had shaped a family, one meal, one sacrifice at a time. Still, that night, I lay awake in my small guest room, staring at the ceiling. The laughter replayed in my head like an echo that refused to fade. I whispered into the dark, "Henry, I wish you were here. I could use a bit of your strength tonight." I didn't know then that the next day would bring a turn none of them saw coming, one that would make Amanda question every word she had said. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the blinds, painting long stripes across my quilt. I moved slowly, my joints reminding me that time had its own way of keeping score. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that follows too much laughter the night before. I brewed coffee, its aroma filling the kitchen like a small act of rebellion. For all that had happened, this space still belonged to me in spirit. I heard faint voices from the living room. Amanda was talking to her parents, that clipped, polite tone she used when she was trying to impress. "We're planning to renovate," she said. "Mom wants to update the whole kitchen, make it more modern." Her mother hesitated. "It's already lovely, dear. Margaret has such a warm touch in here." Amanda sighed. "Yes, but it's cluttered. Too many old things. It feels stuck in time." I took a sip of my coffee, letting the bitterness anchor me. "Old things," she said. I wondered if that included me. When I stepped into the room, Amanda stopped mid-sentence. Her parents greeted me warmly. Her father even stood up. "Good morning, Margaret. We were just admiring how cozy this place feels. Reminds me of my grandmother's home." "Thank you," I replied. "Cozy is what keeps a heart steady." Amanda forced a smile, pretending not to notice the tension that suddenly filled the room. My son, Michael, came in a moment later, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Morning, everyone," he mumbled. He kissed Amanda's cheek, then glanced at me. "Mom, you sleep okay?" "Fine," I said, though my voice betrayed a tremor. Breakfast was awkward. Amanda tried to control the conversation, but her parents kept turning it toward me, asking about my recipes, about the garden, about Henry. I could tell they were trying to make amends for their daughter's coldness, though they never mentioned it outright. After they left, Amanda turned to me, her tone sharp as glass. "You don't have to charm everyone, you know. They're my parents." I met her eyes for the first time that morning. "I wasn't trying to charm anyone, dear. I was just being myself." She scoffed. "Well, maybe being yourself is the problem. You cling to the past. You make people uncomfortable." Michael started to speak, but I stopped him with a gentle hand. "It's all right, son," I said softly. "Some lessons life teaches on its own." I went back to my room after that. My hands shook slightly as I folded laundry, but my heart, strangely, felt lighter. Maybe it was the way Amanda's parents had looked at me, or maybe it was the truth that sometimes dignity doesn't need an audience. Later that week, an invitation arrived in the mail. It was for a charity event at the local community center, a scholarship dinner I had been quietly sponsoring for years in Henry's name. Michael had helped with donations, but he never told Amanda. I never asked him to. It was something we did together, mother and son, in quiet gratitude for the life Henry had given us. When I mentioned the event at dinner, Amanda rolled her eyes. "Oh, that little town thing? Isn't that for retirees?" Her parents, who had stopped by again for a short visit, exchanged glances. "Actually," her father said carefully, "we were invited too. Margaret, we didn't realize you were behind it." Amanda looked confused. "Behind what?" "The Henry Adams Scholarship Foundation," her mother said. "It's been funding education for local kids for almost a decade." Amanda's fork froze midair. "You mean that's her?" I smiled, stirring my tea. Henry believed education changes lives. I just tried to carry that forward. Her mother reached across the table, touching my hand. "That's beautiful, Margaret." Amanda sat back, her face pale. For once, she had nothing to say. Her father leaned in. "We'll be honored to sit with you at the dinner. You must let us." The room fell into silence.
broken only by the ticking of the clock on the wall. I caught Michael's eyes. They were glistening with pride. After dinner, Amanda helped clear the table. Her movements were stiff, her silence thick. Finally, she muttered, "You could have told me about it." I said gently, "There are things that don't need to be said until the right moment." She didn't respond, but I noticed something shift in her expression. Confusion, maybe even guilt. That night, I sat by the window, the moonlight spilling across my lap. I thought about Henry, about how he used to say, "You don't have to prove your worth, Margaret. Just live it." I had lived it, quietly, faithfully, without asking for applause. But sometimes life brings the moment when silence finally speaks louder than words. And mine, I knew, was just beginning to speak.
The night of the scholarship dinner arrived with a soft drizzle and the kind of air that carries memories. I stood before the mirror, fastening the small pearl earrings Henry had given me on our 25th anniversary. They were simple, elegant, the kind of beauty that doesn't need to announce itself. Michael knocked softly on my door. "You ready, Mom?" I smiled at his reflection behind me. He looked so much like his father tonight. The same calm eyes, the same quiet confidence. "As ready as I'll ever be," I said. When we arrived at the community center, the room was already filling up. Warm lights reflected off the polished wood floors, and the faint hum of conversation mingled with soft piano music. A banner hung at the front. The Henry Adams Scholarship Foundation, celebrating 10 years of changing lives. Amanda walked slightly ahead, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. She wore a sleek black dress, beautiful, but cold somehow, like armor. Her parents greeted the event organizers warmly, but Amanda's gaze was restless, scanning the crowd, as though searching for someone to impress. Then a young woman approached me. "Mrs. Adams?" she asked shyly. "I don't know if you remember me. I'm Clara Jensen. You funded my nursing scholarship 5 years ago." My heart fluttered. "Clara," I said softly, "of course I remember. How are you?" Her eyes filled with emotion. "I finished my degree last year. I'm working at St. Luke's Hospital now. I just wanted to thank you for everything. You didn't just help me study, you gave me hope when I had none." Before I could respond, Amanda turned toward us, clearly listening. Clara continued, her voice trembling slightly. "My mom still talks about how your kindness changed our lives. She said your husband must have been a wonderful man to inspire something like this." Tears stung my eyes, but I managed a smile. "He was, and I think he'd be proud to see you now." Amanda's mother came closer, her voice gentle. "Margaret, I had no idea the foundation was this significant." I shrugged modestly. "It was never about significance, just giving back a little of what life gave us." The dinner began soon after. I sat beside Amanda's parents at the head table, with Michael and Amanda across from us. As the host welcomed everyone and spoke of the foundation's impact, I could feel Amanda's eyes on me. Curious, conflicted, maybe even a little ashamed. When they announced that I would be saying a few words, I almost declined. Public speaking had never been my comfort, but something inside me, something deep and quiet, told me this moment wasn't just for me anymore. It was for every unspoken moment I'd endured in silence. I rose slowly, the soft rustle of my dress barely audible. The microphone felt cold in my hands. "Good evening," I began. "When my husband, Henry, passed away, I thought my life had gone silent. He was the kind of man who believed in small acts of kindness,
the ones that ripple farther than you ever see. So in his memory, I started this foundation, not because I wanted to be remembered, but because I wanted him to live on in every young life that found its footing because someone cared. The room was still. Only the soft clinking of glasses in the back reminded me the world hadn't stopped turning. Henry used to say, "The best inheritance we can leave isn't money, it's compassion." That's what this scholarship is about. It's not charity. It's a hand held out across time saying, "You matter." When I finished, the applause rose slowly, then built until it filled the entire hall. Faces glowed, hands clapped, and for a moment, I felt Henry beside me, proud, patient, smiling that small smile that had carried me through our hardest years. Amanda's mother stood applauding. Even Michael's eyes were glistening. But Amanda, she just sat there, motionless, her expression unreadable. After the applause faded and people began to mingle again, Amanda approached me. Her voice was quiet, strained. "Why didn't you tell me about this, Margaret?" I turned to her gently. Because it wasn't mine alone to tell. It belonged to everyone it helped. Her eyes flickered. "I said those things to you, about staying in the kitchen, about being stuck in the past. I didn't know." I stopped her with a soft smile. "Amanda, sometimes we speak from ignorance, not cruelty, but the heart always knows when it's time to listen." She swallowed hard. "Your kitchen, it's not cluttered. It's alive. It's warm. I see that now." Her mother, who'd been standing nearby, touched her daughter's shoulder. "You could learn a lot from her, dear." She nodded slightly, her eyes shimmering. For the first time, she looked at me not as an obstacle, but as something quietly unshakable. Later that night, as the event ended and guests began to leave, several scholarship students came to thank me. Each story a thread in the tapestry of memory Henry and I had unknowingly built. Michael hugged me before we left. "Mom, I'm so proud of you. You always taught me what grace really looks like." I smiled, brushing his cheek. "It's not grace, darling. It's just love with patience." Outside, the rain had stopped. The air smelled clean, new. Amanda stood beside the car, her expression softer than I'd ever seen it. "You looked beautiful tonight," she said quietly. "And I'm sorry for everything." I placed a gentle hand on her arm. "You're young, Amanda. Life will teach you what really matters. All I ask is listen when it does." She nodded, tears threatening to spill. "I will." As we drove home, I watched the city lights blur past the window, each one a reflection of the years that had passed. The joy, the heartbreak, the lessons learned in silence. That night, when I finally lay down, I whispered Henry's name into the darkness. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. Because somehow, in all that had been said and unsaid, I knew he'd be proud.
The days after the scholarship dinner carried a new kind of quiet. Not the heavy, lonely kind, but one filled with reflection. Amanda had grown strangely gentle in her presence, as though she were carefully unlearning the walls she had once built around herself. One morning, I was in the garden, tending to my lilies, when she appeared at the gate, carrying a tray. The sight made me pause. Amanda never came by unannounced. "I brought coffee," she said, smiling faintly. "Michael's still at work, so I thought, maybe we could talk?" I wiped my hands on my apron and motioned for her to join me on the bench beneath the oak tree. The air smelled of rain and soil, and sunlight dripped through the leaves like honey. For a long while, we just sat there, sipping coffee, listening to the soft hum of the world. Then she spoke. "I didn't grow up with much warmth," she said quietly. "My mother was always trying to impress people. My father worked constantly. I think that's why I've always pushed so hard, tried to control everything." I listened, saying nothing. When I met Michael, he was the first person who didn't care about appearances. He talked about you, how strong you were, how you held the family together after his father died. But when I met you, I think I was jealous. Her honesty caught me off guard. "Jealous?" I asked softly. She nodded. "You had something I didn't. Peace. I thought if I could make this house mine, make you smaller somehow, I'd feel in control." I took her hand gently. "Control is a lonely kind of comfort, dear. Love doesn't ask for it. It invites you to share." Her eyes shimmered, the tension in her shoulders finally melting. "I'm sorry, Margaret. Truly." I smiled. "Apologies are the seeds of change. Let's see what grows." Over the next few weeks, Amanda began to visit more often. Sometimes she'd join me in the kitchen, curious but hesitant. She'd watch how I kneaded dough or how I measured spices without ever looking at the labels. "You don't use recipes," she once marveled. I laughed softly. "Recipes are rules. Cooking is love. You just have to know who you're feeding." Little by little, she began to open up. She asked questions about Henry, about our early years. Sometimes when I shared stories of the past, of the long nights he and I spent building our lives from nothing, I could see admiration flicker across her face. Then, one Saturday morning, something unexpected happened. Amanda arrived with a bouquet of fresh daisies in an envelope. She said, "I wanted to show you something." Inside was a printed proposal for a new program, the Henry and Margaret Culinary Scholarship, a partnership between her event company and my foundation. "It's for students who want to pursue hospitality or culinary arts," she explained. I thought, maybe we could fund it together. Your love for cooking deserves to be passed on. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat tightened. "Amanda, this is beautiful." She smiled shyly. "I thought it was time I learned to give back too. You inspired that." I touched her cheek lightly. "You've grown, dear, more than you realize." The next few months passed like a quiet rebirth. We worked side by side on the scholarship project, organizing events, reviewing applications, and meeting with students. I saw in her a version of herself she'd long buried, kind, patient, and deeply capable of compassion. But just when I thought peace had settled into our lives, life, in its strange, unpredictable rhythm, decided to test it. One evening, while preparing for the scholarship's launch event, Michael received a call from the hospital. Amanda's father had collapsed during a business trip. We rushed there immediately. Amanda sat silently in the waiting room, her hands trembling. For the first time, she looked small, fragile. After what felt like hours, the doctor came out with a grim expression. "He's stable for now, but his heart condition is severe. He'll need constant care." Amanda broke down, burying her face in her hands. "He's always been so strong," she whispered. "I don't know how to handle this." I moved closer, placing an arm around her shoulders. "Then don't try to handle it alone," I said softly. "You have family now. Let us help." She looked up, tears streaking her face. "Family," she repeated, almost like she was tasting the word for the first time. In the weeks that followed, I visited the hospital often. Amanda's mother, usually so polished and distant, grew humble in her gratitude. One day she turned to me and said, "Margaret, I misjudged you. I thought grace came from wealth or charm, but now I see it's something much quieter." I smiled gently. Grace is learned through pain, not praise. Through it all, Amanda began to rely on me, not as an obligation, but as an anchor.
We'd cook meals for the nurses together, bring small gifts for the patients, and sometimes just sit in silence by her father's bedside. One evening, as we walked out of the hospital, Amanda stopped under a flickering streetlight. She said, "You were right. Life teaches you what really matters. I was too blind to see it before." I touched her arm. The beauty of life is that it forgives us long before we forgive ourselves. She smiled faintly, tears glimmering in her eyes. "Thank you for not giving up on me." I looked at her with quiet affection. "You're my daughter too, Amanda. Maybe not by blood, but by grace." She nodded slowly, her expression full of something that could only be described as love, raw, humbled, and real. That night when I returned home, I stood in the kitchen, the same place where she'd once told me to stay. But now, it felt different. The same walls that had once echoed with quiet hurt now held something warmer. Memories of laughter, the scent of second chances. And as I set the teapot on the stove, I realized sometimes life's greatest miracles don't arrive with fanfare. They begin with small, fragile moments of understanding and bloom quietly into love.
Final chapter. The speech that changed everything. The night of the Henry and Margaret Culinary Scholarship Gala arrived, with soft drizzle in the air, the kind that turns city lights into silver rivers. The ballroom shimmered with gold tones and floral warmth, a room filled with community members, donors, and families whose children now dreamed because of one woman's quiet generosity. I stood by the entrance, my silver hair pinned neatly, wearing a simple navy gown. Amanda was across the room, elegant, confident, greeting guests with a sincerity that came from somewhere new. Every so often, her eyes would find mine, and she'd smile, the kind of smile that bridges broken years. Michael appeared beside me, straightening his tie nervously. "You look beautiful, Mom," he said, pressing a kiss to my cheek. "Thank you, dear," I whispered, adjusting his collar like I used to when he was a boy. "Your father would be proud tonight." He nodded, eyes glistening. He would have loved this. As the evening began, Amanda took the stage. Her voice trembled slightly as she greeted the audience. When we started this project, it wasn't just about food or education. It was about rediscovering what family means, and the woman who taught me that is sitting right there. She turned toward me, the spotlight softening over my seat. My breath caught. Amanda continued, her voice steadier now. "A while ago, I told her to stay in the kitchen, but what I didn't realize was that kitchen was where love lived. It was where strength simmered quietly. Tonight, we honor Margaret, the heart of our family and the soul of this foundation." Applause filled the room like a tide, washing away years of misunderstanding. I rose slowly, humbled, tears burning the corners of my eyes. When the clapping faded, Amanda gestured for me to come forward. My legs trembled slightly, but I walked with grace, feeling Henry's invisible presence beside me. As I reached the stage, Amanda handed me a microphone. "Would you like to say something, Mom?" she asked gently. I looked out at the sea of faces, neighbors who once pitied me, relatives who had doubted me, young students filled with dreams. I took a deep breath. "My husband, Henry, used to say that life has two kinds of wealth, the kind you spend and the kind you give away. Tonight, I see the truth of that." The audience leaned in. "When I lost him, I thought I'd lost everything. Then I was told to stay in the kitchen, as if love had boundaries drawn by walls and tiles. But I learned something there. Sometimes the smallest rooms hold the greatest lessons." A faint chuckle rippled through the crowd. "That kitchen," I continued, "was where I remembered who I was, a woman who built, who fed, who loved. I realized that real dignity doesn't need a stage. But tonight, I'm grateful to stand on one. Amanda's eyes shimmered, her hand covering her heart. I smiled gently at her. To the younger ones in this room, don't ever confuse silence with weakness. The quiet ones are often the ones holding everything together. A tear slipped down Amanda's cheek. I looked around once more, and to my family, I said, voice trembling, "Thank you for letting me stay, not just in the kitchen, but in your hearts." The applause rose again, louder this time, carrying warmth and redemption. I could almost feel Henry's hand on my shoulder, his proud whisper in the back of my mind, "You did well, Maggie." After the ceremony, people surrounded me, former neighbors, guests, even Amanda's parents. Her mother clasped my hands, her voice quivering. "You have the kind of grace I've spent my whole life pretending to have." I squeezed her hand softly. "It's never too late to start being real," I replied. Later that evening, as the hall emptied, Amanda and I stood alone among the flickering candles and half-finished plates of dessert. She turned toward me, eyes wet but shining. "I wanted to show you something," she said. She led me outside to the courtyard, where a bronze plaque had been mounted beside a small garden. I bent to read it. "The Henry and Margaret Culinary Scholarship Garden, dedicated to those who feed others, not just with food, but with love." My breath caught. The inscription gleamed softly under the garden lights. Amanda's voice broke. "You've given me more than forgiveness. You've shown me what family truly means." I turned to her and cupped her face gently. "Family," I said, "isn't built by blood or marriage. It's built by the courage to love again." She hugged me tightly. No hesitation, no pride, just the kind of embrace that heals. As we pulled away, I saw Michael standing by the doorway, watching us with tears in his eyes. "You two look like you finally figured it out," he said with a shaky laugh. I chuckled softly. "Took us long enough." He came closer, wrapping his arms around both of us. "Dad would be proud of you both." The three of us stood there, bathed in soft golden light, the night alive with quiet peace. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled, not as a threat, but like a deep applause from the heavens. When I went home that night, I walked into the kitchen one last time. The room glowed gently, the same familiar smell of cinnamon and warmth filling the air. I placed my hands on the counter, smiling faintly. "Well, Henry," I whispered, "they finally saw what you always did." I turned off the lights and stepped away, leaving the kitchen door slightly open, not as a symbol of servitude anymore, but of love freely given and grace finally understood. Because sometimes life doesn't give us the last word through anger or revenge. It gives it through forgiveness. And that, I realized, was the most powerful ending of all.